We get another opportunity to get to know the new Penn State football team later today. All kinds of great stuff coming up on the show, including our preview of that, which is going to be a preview of what you get over at BWIillustrated.com. I'll give you all the sales pitches later in the show. But first off, I want to say hello to our Tuesday team here on a Wednesday. Everyone, our brain plasticity hopefully is nice and flexible, and we're all going to adapt to the situation where, you know, you're not Ron, you're not Greg Pickle. I'm sitting here in the host chair. Because of the schedule change, and Greg is probably currently driving on his way up here to State College to be at this afternoon's event. We did a team swap for Tuesdays and Wednesdays, and now we have Sean Fitz and Nate Bauer here on our Wednesday show. So, gentlemen, welcome. Thank you for making the accommodations today, and hopefully we'll not mess up Greg's sterling reputation of Wednesday shows. So that's the main goal today.
So far the sample size says that you use bigger words on Wednesday. Your intro was just spotless there. So I don't know if you use us as a tune-up for the Wednesday show, but no, we're happy to be here. And as you mentioned, we've got some real actual conversations with Penn State football players today. I would appreciate Penn State putting that together for us. We're going to talk to a bunch of them this afternoon. So definitely follow BWIillustrated.com. Check out the reactions and everything like that. I do have bad news. We just got to note that Kobe Howard's not going to be there. So I can't believe, I don't know, not play special teams in the offseason or something like that. I don't know. But he's not going to be there. And just a hit to the list. But, you know, we'll get him at some point. But looking forward to that. So definitely check that out on BWIillustrated.com.
Yeah, there's going to be a lot of players, so there's going to be plenty of people to talk to. We're not going to be hurting for quotes and information later today, but one of the things that happened, and we'll just get right into it off the top, is Kashif Moore officially announced as the receivers coach. Not that there was going to be some sort of surprising turn of events, I don't think, but it is an opportunity here to just kind of reset the conversation about the receiver position, which is going to be what we talk about primarily on today's show in general. Any thoughts here, Nate, as we get into the, you are the DocuSign guy, as far as making sure these things, when they become official, we make sure that we comment that they are official. Any thoughts here about Kashif Moore and, his late add to Penn State football?
Yeah, I'm not aware. I was not seeking that information out as to what the official announcement holdup was. It's kind of funny. The guy that runs our magazine last week checked in and was just like, hey, what's up with Moore, right? This has to be official before it goes in the magazine. And I was like, I'm pretty sure that it already is. I think we reported that on Monday, and I'm sure it's just a formality. So I don't know what happened there, but I would assume it's nothing other than the creaking wheels of Penn State bureaucracy. Getting things done and over the line. But no, it's we know the rap sheet, right? The resume at this point for him, and his recent success in developing, some pretty productive receivers, specifically as part of a passing offense that was pretty productive. And then, how many Biletnikoff finalists are there every year? 5?
3.
3. So
really should have been a setup that you
really prepped that well.
That was not a rhetorical question. That was an honest question by Nate. I appreciate learning. Live learning. The problem is people are too afraid to ask a question they don't know. We all learned something. I didn't know that. I didn't know there were 3 at the end. So, Fitz, we've talked about this a bunch of times, but just kind of here as a moment to kind of put a pin in this landmark when it comes to his responsibilities on the recruiting front, on the football front. Everyone wants immediate returns in intel and things like that over at BlueWhiteIllustrated.com. And to me, it's still the get to know you phase for all of these situations. It's just official today. Do you have a different opinion of that, of, Kashif Moore and his impact so far on the team in the first week and a half or so of what he's been here?
Not really, because you are dealing with the move. You're dealing with all the stuff that gets you eventually to the building. And on top of that, it's a dead period. So there's a lot of guys that are in and out right now. In terms of February is the time to get away with your family, if you don't have kids, it's a great time if you're a coach and you don't have kids, or kids left in the house. So not much on there. We've talked to some prospects that have talked to Moore or have gotten offers from Moore. Not a ton right now in terms of the impact that he can have as a receivers coach. He's going to step into some pretty decent shoes there with Noah Pauley, who was really well liked right off the bat. The silver lining there is Noah Pauley was here for a month, so. Yeah. If you had to reset, say you're Khalil Taylor from Pittsburgh, if you had to reset with Noah Pauley, shouldn't be that hard in theory to reset with Kashif Moore. So we'll see what happens with him. Tying up loose ends, Penn State has had 2 Biletnikoff finalists. Both were Bobby Ingram. He won the award in '94, and he was a finalist in '95. Terry Glenn, Keyshawn Johnson, Bobby Ingram. That's a heck of a finalist list there.
Yeah.
For 1995. But I had to tie that one up, or else I'd be thinking about the rest of the show.
Speaking of the NFL and future pros, today the news came late last night for Drew Allar, something we had been asking and speculating about because he had not talked about it publicly, but Drew Allar will throw at the Combine. I talked yesterday about how it's happening right now in terms of the medical check of his ankle and whatever else might be going on inside his body, that it has gone through 4 years of college football, plus the interviews are more important than whether he would or would not throw at the Combine. However, for a guy in his situation with 6 games of film in his final year, in a season that didn't go great, I imagine the throwing is not nothing, Fitz. How do you view the performance coming up later this week and the importance of it for him and for Penn State?
Yeah, I mean, number one, I hope he's ready to go, because you're never sure how that I mean, I'm sure he's been working out with Brad, and I'm sure he's been working out, getting ready for the actual Combine stuff. And I'm not sure that, testing is relevant for him anyway. But I'm going to guess he probably doesn't do a ton of that stuff. But, the throwing has always been his strong point. We talk about, I hate to make the comparison, but you think back to when Christian Hackenberg was going through his pro day, and that was the appeal, right? How does this guy throw it differently than everyone else? And you can see that he does. You can see when he's in a workout situation, he certainly does that. So I don't think anyone's going to be particularly that surprised with the physical skills of Drew Allar, but I hesitate to think that this is going to move the needle all that much. The flip side there, of course, it takes one team to fall in love, right? It takes one team to fall in love and move them up a round or two, and hopefully that happens for Drew's sake. So we'll see what happens. I think he's going to have a good showing there, as he has typically been that guy. And tell you what, there's not too many people that throw the football like him. There's a lot of other stuff that needs to be evaluated by, and the pro scouts will do that. But there's not too many people that can go out there and just whip it around like him.
But this is a starting point, and I guess the thing I'm curious about, and this will be my last thing about this, is this will he do enough this week to get teams more interested in a private workout and more interested in coming to his pro day? Because I think those are the two that show more interest, especially are those 30 visits where teams can bring you in specifically to the organization and do a more thorough get to know you sort of interview. And so just kind of crossing off all of the things on the list, do you think the throwing is part of that to get him to that next phase and to kind of grow whatever buzz actually matters, not the external one, but the internal one about a guy who might be, okay, we weren't sure about his health or whatever, but now we feel more confident in that?
Yeah, I think so. I think that's the main thing, right? Is just to get it in front of him. He knows what his strengths are, and his strengths are throwing the football. It's I don't think that's ever been a secret there. So yeah, like I said, I hesitate to think that this is going to move the needle too much, but except in the way that you outlined it there, that if he catches someone's eye, all of a sudden, if he gets on one team's board, then it's kind of like a snowball effect, because the pro scouts are like college scouts. They hear things and then they're like, okay, well, I got to go back and I got to check this, double check this tape, double check whatever is going to happen. And he's going to get, I guess, evaluated more thoroughly. And that can be good and that can be bad. We'll see what happens in the long run. But yeah, just going out and throwing, especially at the Combine, where most of the guys, I mean, I'm looking at the list right now, and it's Fernando Mendoza and Ty Simpson, Carson Beck, and those guys. Most of those guys won't throw. Now, you look on the flip side here, and it's an absolute just mind-bending experience when you're thinking back from a year ago that Drew, Garrett Nussmeier, and Cade Klubnik are going to throw as well, or is going to be there as well. And those are the guys that are sort of in the rehab phase, because they're going to get a lot of questions about what happened last year. And it's going to be really interesting to see how they handle those. Hopefully he's prepared, and hopefully does a good job.
we've seen worse quarterbacks get combine buzz and pre-draft buzz where they become second-round prospects in some teams' eyes because of all of the traits that they have. And to be clear, the quarterbacks you just listed off, this is not a strong quarterback draft. So there is an opportunity for a surprise. Bizzle says, like, he's not going to be looked at as a one-year starter, but people do like the idea of developing him in-house, where he's been a 3-year starter for Penn State football, but there's still a lot of maturity. It feels like there's a lot of growth that he can do, and people are going to love all of the things that we already talked about. Also here in the chat from Nate, did you have something?
Yeah, I have a question. Why do guys not throw?
Because you have unfamiliar receivers and you are throwing unfamiliar routes in an unfamiliar place, and it's not the best. It's kind of like shooting in basketball, right? Where it's a new place. The spatial awareness, I think, is part of it. But just generally, you are not familiar with those receivers, so you don't know when they break. You don't know their consistency in their routes, and it is a variability. If you throw a lot of bad balls, it looks bad on TV. And that can drive perception.
Yeah,
and
when
it's
you
not
get
necessarily fair.
When you get to pro day, you control the variables, right? And you don't do that in Indy. So that's the risk that I guess you take. But
I guess it just seems like if you're a scout, it seems like a bad gauge, right? If you're a GM, like how are you gauging what a performance looks like? I mean, I guess you could say like the upside if you do really well is, oh man, this guy like seamlessly, it doesn't matter what the
adaptability. Yeah. That's what you're looking for is adversity, adaptability, and putting these guys in uncomfortable situations and making them perform.
And this is a situation where you're at a premium position where you're at the combine and everybody's at the combine, but are you going to send your offensive coordinator to Penn State for pro day later in March? Are you going to, what kind of investment are you going to make into scouting him further? And I think that this is a starting point, especially for a guy that had a big step back last year. I mean, you look at Rob in the chat says that the throw that he made to Ross and FIU is going to make people salivate. He's got a bunch of those, and it's everything else that's going to hold him up, right? It's like there are a few guys in the college game that can make some of the throws that he's made, but you sprinkle that in with everything else, the rest of the stuff, and then he's coming off an injury, so many questions out there about Drew, and I mean, rightfully so. But hopefully he's able to answer them.
And he's throwing to a spot, and they can evaluate that whether the receiver is there or not. Is that generally
there's more leeway there? Yeah. I think you look at the receiver. Everybody's you're going to have a receiver that runs a 4.3, then you're going to have a receiver that runs a 4.5. You're going to both tell them to run a streak and then hit them. If that ball's in the same spot, that receiver might not be. So I think there's a little bit more leeway there with that should have been caught, basically.
And those are kind of the things of like, how do you throw a deep ball? Do you have the touch and accuracy and the timing and all those things? And then the ones that make you look bad are like the deep digs where you're coming your receivers breaking at 10 yards and coming in, and they're being evaluated on whether or not they're being consistent in that as well. But again, like Fitz said, the way they run the route, the timing and all those things, if you are not dialed in, you can miss just because of like the chemistry we talk about in football. And so it is that's the risk there for like looking bad on TV and not looking accurate, which is something that to go back to the original comparison, there's only one Josh Allen who's completely changed his accuracy profile from college to the NFL. Most of that time, by this point, a lot of those guys, that stuff is baked in. David says, BWI is the best place for Penn State coverage. Like and subscribe. Come over to the message board to get the full scope of Blue White Illustrated. Thank you for, not only is it just not me saying it the same time over and over again, but for somebody else in the chat to vouch for us. Deeply appreciate that, David. You should definitely follow his advice, especially because you can get it for just $1, where you can try us out for a week. Subscribe right now for $1, and you get that insight to the things that we've been writing. We're going to have a quick preview of something that Fitz wrote earlier this week, and then we're going to talk about it more on Thursday. But if you want to go read some of that stuff, BlueWhiteIllustrated.com. We're going to get into some of Nate's writing, but as always, we got an hour, and we're a quarter of the way through that already. So make sure you go check us out on the site because it's an infinite amount of time that we can have these conversations. Bizzle says loves the message board and the amount of articles they produce is absurd. I hope that's a badge of honor, especially for Greg Pickle, who again is not here today. The thing I want to ask you guys about now is something that I find absurd, which is how good Anti-Fragile Brewing Company in downtown State College is. Nate, can you tell me about Anti-Fragile? Which one of you has been most recently so that you can give us the fresh update? I was there on Saturday. I only could get a kombucha because I was working, but I wanted to know which one of you guys has been there most recently to give us the latest update on what they got on tap.
That's probably me, right? I think I was there twice 2 weekends ago, not this past weekend. So yeah, they've got a bunch on tap right now. A couple of hazies. This is off the top of my head. A couple of hazies, a couple of pilsners, an imperial stout that's really good, and they have their hazy pale ale on right now. Usually on pretty regularly. So, but it, whatever you get is going to be good because it's the best beer in State College. Anti-Fragile Brewing, East Calder Way, one of our favorite spots. Not just a plug. I was actually, it's really funny. I was playing basketball on campus 2 weeks ago, and a guy came up and he listens to the show and he says, "I just got one question. Do you actually go to Anti-Fragile?" I said, "Yeah, absolutely. Like this is not a plug, or it's a plug. This is not a ruse here. This is a spot that we like to hang out because it is good people, good beer, good atmosphere, good conversation. It's a great place to, take a family, take some friends when you're in town for a basketball game, a hockey game, what have you. It's a great spot to meet up and have a good time, have a cheesesteak, have some kombucha, have a mixed drink. The world is your oyster. They don't have oysters, but the world is your oyster at Anti-Fragile Brewing. Check it out again, East Calder Way. It's a great time of year, and it's, hopefully see some people on the B-roll here. Hopefully we can get outside soon and drink on their porches.
Yeah,
that's a great little atmosphere down there.
Always make sure when you go that you say you're from the BWI Live Show. Tell them that we sent you there. That helps us out, and it helps them out also, just going and supporting and all those things. So thank you for everyone who does that, because there's a ton of people who do that already. Let's talk about spring football. We've been doing on the Wednesday show some positional breakdowns. We did running back. I think we did linebacker. And now we're getting into the pass catchers. We might have done receivers. I don't remember. I don't keep good notes or records. But the reason we're talking about this particular subject today is because Nate wrote a really good 3-2-1 over at BlueWhiteIllustrated.com about pass catchers. And this has become a yearly question for the Penn State offense. Who's going to lead the team in receptions? A tight end or a receiver? So take me through, Nate, your reasoning, how you viewed this conversation for Penn State this year, and how you work through all the newness in the offense with the pieces that are assembled right now. Or are you frozen? Oh, there we go.
You got me. I think the premise was whether or not they'll have a receiver with 50 catches, right? Like that's kind of the threshold, and something that they haven't had over the past couple of seasons, and or whether or not the tight end is kind of propels the passing offense, right? And so, I asked, like, full stop. I came to you and just are the players that they have at tight end, right? Are they going to eat each other's productivity, right? Is it just going to be rap, right? Probably not, right? You're going to have you're going to have more distribution there with Brahmer. Burkle is, I think, on the mend, so to be determined what kind of productivity you see from him this season. But then with the receivers, it's kind of the same question, right? As Eskildson and then Sowell. But after those two guys, right, and what to expect from those two guys, then what's the next step after that, right? Is it Kobe Howard?
Yeah.
Right. Where's Lyric Samuel in that conversation? Brookins, right? Like, it's kind of it feels very much to me like a wide open question, right? In terms of how this offense takes shape, and then where does the productivity come from? And as you put it, and I think that I'm echoing your sentiment here, like, it better be a receiver. Right? It better be a receiver, and it better be more than 50 if they're going to have the type of season that they want to have this season.
Yeah, I just from what I've seen from this offense and this team over the last couple of years, between all of the different iterations of this particular frustration, if you don't have a receiver that's explosive and is giving you a field stretching ability, what you have is an offense that's going to go 13 plays and average 5 to 8 yards a play, and it's going to be a grinding, frustrating offense that scores points but does not necessarily give you the dynamic ability to threaten the defense and create matchup advantages. Fitz, how do you view this situation? I had a better way to phrase this, and then Nate got me going. So when it comes to this dynamic, how do you view the situation with this particular team?
Well, we meld both, right? You look at Iowa State last year. Benjamin Bramer led the team with 37 catches. Chase Soule had the 32. Eskildsen had 30, and then Burkle had 25. So you're 2-2 right there, right? And then you go back a year, you're like, okay, well, they're tight end heavy. Well, you go back a year, and Jaden Higgins had 87 catches. Jalen Knoll had 80, and then it dropped off to Burkle at 25. So like very, very much what's the big version of matchup dependent, talent dependent, right? They're looking to their guys that have the most talent. Right now, I think you probably give the talent edge to the tight ends because I think they're pretty good. But I think you still give the catches edge to the wide receivers because I think they'll try and make that work a little bit more. The running game is very important in this. I think if I'm going to look at where I would compare this from a Penn State point of view, you think back to the 2023 offense. Keandre led the team with 53 catches. Tyler Warren had 34. Theo Johnson had 34. Nick Singleton had 26. Dante Cephas had 22. Trey Wallace had 19. That kind of makes sense to me, right? You've got somebody at the top, the receiver pecking order, and then it sort of trickles down and evens out pretty quickly. I think that, Bramer can have a bunch of catches. Rappleyea can have a bunch of catches. Nate mentioned Burkle's on the mend as well. What's interesting to me, Rapp had 20 catches this year. He had fewer catches than Luke Reynolds, which I think that kind of plays with your mind a little bit because you think about how much they used him at the end of the year, how much they leaned on him, and he had 6 fewer catches than Luke Reynolds last year. So I think his number goes up, but I think they, will eat into each other and sort of even it out a little bit. Soule is probably the guy that you hope can be the deep threat. And where does Kobe Howard fit into all this in the slot? Does that make a bunch of sense? Personnel groupings are going to be important as well. They're going to play a lot of tight ends, but also like there's a lot of snaps to go around. There's a lot of opportunities for them to play 3 wide receivers to, if you're taking shots down the field, rotate that a little bit more than we've been used to seeing the last couple of years.
Yeah, so a couple things that happened last year that I think kind of paint the conversation and trying to dig on this. Chase Soule, at the beginning of the year for them, they were very, very excited about him, and then he got hurt in fall camp. It was kind of a similar story to Penn State with Devontae Ross in the sense of like the guy who was going to actually be, I think, the number one threat in the offense got hurt in the offseason, and then you didn't have that chemistry in fall camp to then relay into the season. And you guys cited the catch numbers, which are important because that's the end production, right? But to me, like when I look at intent, I look at targets, and Soule had 59 targets to lead the team. So actually, Nate, when you and I were talking about this, I'm like, yeah, Chase Soule was the leader, and I didn't even look at the actual receptions, which is the end product that is more important. But like, because that signals who are you trying to get involved in the offense as much as possible. And those top 3 were 59, Bramer at 51, and Eskildsen at 50. So it is a very even, I won't say egalitarian, very even way of distributing the targets if you have those. But the inconsistency that they had last year at the receiver position because of a bunch of injuries, I think muted what they wanted to do, which probably looks closer to 2024 with Higgins than it does what we saw last year. But when your best receiver is a tight end, that's what you're going to do. And that's the adaptability, I think, of this offense is, yes, you can pivot to that, but it's not the original intent. That, to me, is the difference between some of the things that we saw the last couple years with Andy Kotelnicki, where it was very clear he wanted to funnel the offense through the tight ends because they were worth it with Tyler Warren, but then it really became who's worth it in 2025 with that group of pass catchers. This feels a little bit more, I think, opportunistic for the receivers than it did previously, where there is more of a passing game. There's more backbone to the passing game that will give them opportunities as opposed to previously.
Is Soul, like, who is this guy? What is he?
6'2", explosive, fast football player, but the rest of it is the question because of the injuries last year. Does he have the concentration to be kind of a dynamic guy? But you look at the highlights of him catching one-on-one passes down the sideline, body control, his ability to back shoulder, his ability to leap and get the ball. It just was not consistent throughout the year. But the highlights were like very, very impressive. So that's the hope, is that the highlights are more consistent this year. Fitz, do you have
Seed Black now, anyone?
I hadn't thought about Seed. Yeah. I guess he's a little bit, Saheed was a little bit more, like, he had a very specific role in the offense where he was kind of like a deep threat, right? Mm-hmm. If I remember that correctly. That's a great question, because that was how they used him last year. Eskildsen was more of the underneath catch and run kind of guy. Yeah. He's a little more physical than Saheed, where he's a little bigger. He's a little thicker than Blacknall. So I think there's more of a wide receiver one kind of body type there, but I don't think he's Chris Godwin. So I think that's a fair, if you're asking between the two, I would say you're probably right on that one.
Right.
With the tight ends.
And they like him. They like him a lot. I mean, they are obviously, I think, viewing him as the number one when healthy. And I think that's rightfully so, because I think his peak is probably at the top of that list. I also don't think they know what Kobe Howard is capable of. And let's be honest, we don't know what Kobe Howard is capable of, but we think he's a pretty talented guy. So is he the guy that, when you're taking shots downfield to Soul, is he the guy that moves the sticks in between? Like, is he the guy that's going to get the volume? And is he the guy that's going to make that happen? Eskildsen on the other side, how do you work him in? Is he an X? Is he a guy that, puts up 4 or 5 catches a game? I think that's worth looking into as well.
What's up, Nate?
Can I Peter Gonzalez was somebody that we talked about, or that was talked about. And I feel like that's not part of the conversation right now. Maybe should be.
Yeah. And so there's that depth Fitz, right? And this is something that I'm a fan of what Peter Gonzalez can be. I think Eskildsen and he have a similar profile as that Z receiver who could block and be an explosive guy, catch and run, or a vertical threat. But he's just been injured, and I don't know what's on the other side of that. I'm optimistic about what he could be, but I've been burned before about being optimistic, Fitz. How do you see that?
You just said it, right? You like what he can be, and he's not close to that right now because he's been hurt a lot. So
he's not trying to be hurt.
I know he's not trying to be hurt.
Right.
But, he doesn't make it on the field. That's the thing. He might be really, really great. But if he doesn't play in the game, it doesn't really matter, right? That's where we're at with that. I think he's talented. I think he's, you look at what he can bring to the table, and you look at his athletic profile and his high school, what he did in high school, and there's elements of that can fit in this offense. He was a deep ball guy. He was a guy that, probably didn't have the most variety among his route tree in high school, but at the same time, if you can make plays downfield, you can be valuable in this offense. So, potential with him. So there's
and that's really all the depth players. That's kind of the hard part of this conversation, is probably Kobe Howard we have the most evidence in terms of his production, but Lyric Samuel, Brookins, Jones Jr. has more production, but at Grambling State. So the question is here's the thing. I see this as a 2-receiver offense. You got 2 receivers, and you'll go to an 11 personnel when you need to, 2-minute against certain looks. But really, they want to have more tight ends on the field than receivers. So you've got 2 receiver spots, and it becomes who fits who fits that profile better. So Kobe Howard, Peter Gonzalez, any of these young guys, are they going to be good enough to take some snaps from these top 2 that we've already talked about? So when I made my rundown of here are the starters, here's the core offense, and then the question marks are where does Kobe Howard fit in this? Is he the 5th player to come on the field, the 6th player to come on the field, the 7th player to come on the field? I'm curious as to how these young guys can shape the dynamics at the receiver position and make it less skewed towards those top 2. And that's, to me, I think that's the thing they're going to learn in spring football as well. So as much as Penn State fans want Kobe Howard to be the guy who's like, he's the number one receiver, he's coming back, he's going to be a starter. I think like from a trust perspective with coaches, trust is a lot. And maybe the guys last year weren't everything they wanted them to be, but they know more about those two they brought in from Iowa State as opposed to Kobe Howard, who is not exactly the profile for this offense of big, fast, physical, explosive downfield, but is obviously a great football player, is obviously somebody you can use. And how does that change what they want to do on offense? Can those guys be a fulcrum for change? And that, to me, is the biggest wild card. That's what the conversation is this spring and the summer. Nate?
Yeah, I'm gonna set you up to say it. Is there any world where those two guys are not the first two receivers?
I don't think so. I don't think, like,
right?
Injury is the thing.
Penn State returns a kick, 98 yards, and they go, 13 personnel right off the bat. But I mean,
I'm saying, is there a world where they can just get beat, right? That somebody on Penn State's roster, whether it's Keith Jones, like the retained guys, is there any world where the top two older guys that Iowa State brought from, that Matt Campbell brought from Iowa State are not the first two receivers in this offense?
So if Sowell continues to drop the ball, then yes. Like, he had 6 drops last year, which contributed, again, that was kind of the conversation about his slow year and kind of some of the mental process of playing with an injury that he was working through. And I'm trying to see where they were pretty consistent throughout the year. That's the kind of the alarming thing, is like they weren't all at the beginning of the year. He had 2 drops from weeks 10 and 11. So it was a consistent issue for him last year. So if you're telling me that somebody has the same physical dimensions and doesn't drop the football, then yes, he can absolutely lose his starting job. And not, again, like, they're not saying he's the starter. We're saying that it's most likely he's the starter. But it will take the preponderance of evidence that he is not the guy than it is somebody else is the guy.
I think it's also,
and it's is it August versus November, right? October. Like, that's the question. I mean, we've yet to see this play out in spring ball, and we're trying to project it for the fall. And that's kind of where I'm at with that. So yes, the possibility is certainly there. The odds-on favorite would be that those two are starters, and probably Kobe as well. So I don't know. I don't know if the staff is going to announce 16 starters on offense like last year. So it's hard to say.
You think they're going to make some hard choices about they might do 12. I would see they could do 12 and 3 receivers, three tight ends, but not 60. You're not going to have co-starters at running back and 4 at tight end.
Can I say, because I do think you raise an interesting point, Fitz, and I'm curious about both of your feedback on this. Like, do you think Matt Campbell will do any of the public relations placating that happened right down the stretch, right? And Franklin was pretty forthcoming about it, I think, publicly, about like how hard it is to manage egos and personalities in this era of football. And it seems like, to me, Campbell's pretty diametrically opposed to that stance, right? It, like, if we are watching the pregame intros at Beaver Stadium for the first game of the season, and it's not 11 defensive, right? Like, and 11 offensive players, I'll maybe be stunned.
I don't know. Do you think he's going to take the fourth quarter flag, though?
That's a great question. I bet he doesn't even know that exists, nor will he when it happens.
So it'll be there for game 1 and not game 2.
But I hope to God he's paying attention when that happens, so he can say, "This is." So it's just not a good look, Penn State. Like, just anyway, go ahead.
I'm sorry, you're losing me with the fourth quarter flag here. What are you talking about?
You don't go to the games.
That's right.
Sorry. That wasn't, you watched. No, that wasn't a shot. I'm just saying that.
No, that's right.
T-Frank,
handle this one.
It's a funny way to phrase it. It was perfect. Yeah. What's it?
T-Frank, he's got a flag that says fourth quarter. and he waves it around, and so at that point,
it's
the whole stadium knows that it's the fourth quarter, like, which means it's more important than.
Okay. Seems like something everybody already knew.
And to clarify, T. Frank does
it's
the
horrifying.
show, then he goes home and watches the game on his in his cave, and we don't let him out until Monday. So
it's a sore spot in the reality that I live, but not necessarily inaccurate. Fitz absolutely said it the right way. I wasn't
on the
offended.
All-22.
Don't worry.
They don't have that on the coaches' film.
No, it is not on the coaches. There is no cut up of the fourth quarter flag on the coaches' film. I wouldn't mind, like, if they had a little bit longer tail on those things, but no, that does not make it there. Any other final thoughts here?
Gets the people going.
It's Wednesday, and it feels like Wednesday. It feels like there's a break in the space-time continuum with us doing this today. Any other final thoughts here about the receiver battle, Nate? Anything else that you said in the article that you think is prescient that you want to bring up here? And by the way, go read it, BlueWhiteIllustrated.com. Just one of those other ham-fisted promos here. Just $1 to sign up and go read it. So Nate, any other final thoughts about your phrasing or anything else in that article that you thought was worthy of discussion?
Yeah, I mean, look, like as is typically the case, my big picture ideas can all be boiled down to pretty simple, stupid stuff, which is, hey, they need a passing offense. They didn't have one last year. They were bad, bad at passing. You need to be, yes, able to do, like, the numbers don't have to be exactly the same, but the ability has to be the same. They can't, right? It can't just be a running offense, and it can't just be a tight end focused passing game, right? They have to be able to get production from the receivers that hasn't been there. And, I think that there's a healthy and warranted debate that has existed over where does the onus of blame fall, right? Is it Andy Kotelnicki? Is it Drew Allar? Is it the development of the receivers, Marcus Hagans, right? But here's the reality is they're all gone.
Yeah.
Right. Like, they're all gone. So it is a completely clean slate. You've got a completely clean slate offensive coordinator, clean slate receivers coach, and overwhelmingly clean slate receivers. So just how do they fit? How does what's coming over from Iowa State translate to the Big Ten? I mean, we've seen this Big 12, Big 10 movie before, but I think certainly there's optimism and hope within the program that it's a very, very dramatically different ending than, kind of what we've seen before.
All right, so I think this is actually great. We haven't done this one in a while. Who do you think is going to lead Penn State football in receptions next year? Leave your thoughts in the chat or in the YouTube comment section, and we will get to some of those here. But just give us your thoughts on who you think is going to lead Penn State in receiving receptions last year as opposed to running receptions next year. Let's get to Fitz's recruiting update, which is a big one this week. We're going to have a full show about this tomorrow here on the BWI Live YouTube channel. The Rivals 300. Oof, that's a mistake. The Rivals 300 came out this week. So what was your takeaway? Penn State doesn't have any commits in this class, but they have a lot of targets, and those targets moved up and down the board. What are your big takeaways from the impact on Penn State's recruiting for this cycle and everything they're gearing up to do in spring football based on the new information from the rival side of things?
Yeah, nice little update. I think the bigger updates for at least the Northeast area are going to come a little bit later. We move a little bit slower up here. There's not as many camps. Obviously, you look outside and there's not too many camps being run in a couple inches of snow on the ground here. So you look at the guys that have made big moves, and a lot of those are Southern guys, California guys, places where they have these in-person effects. But it was a pretty massive update when you take a look at the class of 2027 as a whole, because there's been nothing since the end of their junior year. So you're seeing a lot of guys move, and I think I wrote it on Monday that this is a really good update. If you see guys move in the Northeast or in the the 6-hour radius around Penn State, if you see guys moving up, that's a good thing, because that is film based. That is focused on what they did their junior year, and that's usually a little bit more reliable than I fell in love with this guy in shorts and t-shirt, and now all of a sudden he's moving up. But a couple of takeaways here. Number 4 prospect nationally overall is Will Menzel from Arizona. Penn State offered him. He was a 3-star when they offered him. He is now the number 4 prospect and the number 1 quarterback nationally. So you're looking at a pretty decent evaluation there. That's going to continue to blow up. Oregon's in there, Auburn's in there. A couple of schools are going to start throwing their name into the mix as well. So there's no real crazy science to it, but Will Menzel showed out at the Elite 11 recently, and he's a big target. Penn State is going to hopefully get him on campus in the spring, maybe get an official visit. Again, he's from Arizona, and I know we've talked about Taylor Mauser being from Arizona. It's going to be a tough one, man. He's the West Coast is available. If Texas gets into the mix here, or some of those Texas schools get into the mix that have the deep pockets. I know he doesn't seem like a kid that's going for money, but circumstances change when you're the number 4 player in the country. All of a sudden you have that ability. We saw it with Carter Meadows last year. Not that he was anything off the charts in terms of NIL or anything like that, but things change when you move up these rankings. And if you're Penn State, if you're this new staff who doesn't particularly care or to look at the rankings, some guys moving up is not a great thing, because all of a sudden it elevates the profile, and then those heavy hitters can come in. So we will see what happens with the rest of the class of 2027. You can check out, I wrote, like 3,000 words on Monday on this. So I'm just kind of touching on the tip of the iceberg here. But you're looking at former commits. Keelan Spell is number 11 overall. Khalil Taylor is number 94. Leighton Von Brandt's number 70. So some familiar names, and some familiar names sitting tight, like Peter Bork at number 107, just recently decommitted from Michigan. Penn State's certainly on the mark there. So
he's my favorite. I think he's very good.
I think he's very good too.
I know that's not a surprise, but like, of the quarterbacks you were talking about, I just like watching, again, this is off highlight film, but he plays on time, and I really like that about him. I think that there's a mental angle to this with Peter Bork that is maybe a little bit underrated for him at this point. Yeah,
Keegan Croucher got a bump to number 50 overall. I still like Bork better. It's just personal preference right there. But you move down the list, and there's some movement in Pennsylvania. I love seeing Cade Cooper there at 226. I think he's a really good player. Yeah. He's right on the heels. Matthew Gregory dropped a bunch, which is not really a surprise. You've been reading our stuff, but you look at the skill sets there with Taylor, Cooper, and Gregory in state as receivers. That's just an interesting trio. So a lot of movement, a lot to talk about, and then we get into the weeds a little bit more in terms of how much does this matter for setting up the next stage of the recruitment, which the next stage of the recruitment is going to be spring visits. We're starting to see them trickle in, and then coaches are going to go on the road for the evaluation period, and then it's going to be official visit time before you know it. So just kind of setting up for that, and who makes sense from a new style evaluation standpoint. There are some guys that jump on that list that I think the old staff would have been all over, that some of the new staff is kind of apprehensive about. And they're all very interesting things. We talked about them. No time to get into it on this show, but I do encourage you to check it out, because there's a lot of data to process, and we love data here.
Yeah, and Ryan's been writing a bunch of stuff, getting us some information about who's visiting in the spring, and some of those setups of the timeline of that. We're going to discuss all of that tomorrow on the BWI Live Recruiting Show. Right now, we need to get to the BWI Mailbag, and I'm excited because I actually did time management this week, and we have enough time for the mailbag. I'm excited for this. Let's do it. Nate, I want to start with you, and I want to start with this conversation. This is from Tin Man on the Blue White Illustrated message boards. By the way, if you have, I have a question already queued up for the chat. But if you've got any questions, put them in the chat, and we'll get to you throughout this. But we have a couple that we have featured from BlueWhiteIllustrated.com on the message board thread. Tin Man wants to know, are we coming to a point where student athletes will be signing binding contracts for their NIL money? It's an investment in the athlete by the program, and that should have some protection against the athletes jumping to the highest bidder year after year. I feel like I know the setup in terms of the constraints of doing that, but Nate, can you give us the kind of lay of the land of how NIL money and commitment works in college football and maybe some of the problems in the way of doing what Tin Man is talking about?
Yeah. I mean, you already have some of it, right? You've already seen certainly the situation that played out at Duke, but also like just more practically, some of the guys that played in the bowl game for Penn State, right? And there were all those opt-outs and everybody was like, well, the reason some of those guys played that wouldn't have played otherwise had NIL attachments, right? There were implications to them participating in that game. So, yes, it's the hang up is employee status,
right,
and pay for play, and so like you have this entire ecosystem that is operating based on a lie and a facade, right? Like this just very disingenuous idea that the mechanism that they started, right, to be able to pay players was based on endorsements, right? Like that was why they were being paid. It was just simply these people have a value, and it is directly tied not to their value to the program or their value to a university. It's tied to their value of sponsorship deals, right?
So then how do we get to the rev share? Because that's not necessarily what that says. And I agree with you. Like, this has become a monstrosity of a system. But we're agreeing that they deserve a percentage of the profits from television deals, but we're not saying they're employees.
Yeah,
it feels messy. If
you admit they're employees, you have to concede a bunch. If you admit that it's pay for play, you have to concede a bunch. And the NCAA is not willing to say that we've been on the wrong side of this all along. And that's a, I guess you would call it a prideful organization. I'm sure there's other words for that, and I'm sure they'll pop up in the chat. But you're looking at the concessions that are being made because of they went so long dragging their feet on this, and now all of a sudden they're in deep water and they can't swim. And just that, I think that's what you're looking at right now. And you aren't, I mean, you don't want to believe it. Like, if you've watched college football all your life, you don't want to believe that, it's pay for play. You don't want to believe all this kind of stuff, but that's the harsh reality when you're taking $1 billion for a TV deal, that somebody's responsible for this. And it's the guys
somebody's making a lot of money.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Nate, you had something there.
Well, they're going to get there, right? Like this will happen the same way that a system that would never consider having a playoff got a playoff, and because they will figure out. And look, like,
does it take does it take legislation? Because one of the biggest problems, they keep losing lawsuits because of the laws about economic gain and the structure of our society. What they want to do goes counter to competitiveness in a marketplace. And so that's how the NFL, that's how all the professional sports work. They have an exemption from those rules. Is that necessary? And does that ever happen? Because to me, that's the driving force behind this.
Well, the legislation's not being set for fairness to both sides, right? It's being set for fairness to one side that has been the one that's made the rules forever, right? And that's why it keeps getting trampled on in court, because it's not fair. It's not.
But that's part of this, is that legislation still has to pass Supreme Court muster at the end. Right. And I mean, you had a 9-0 decision, right? Like, which never happens. So There may be a circumstance where it's in cooperation, right? Legislation in cooperation with fundamental changes that happen in the landscape. But like, it's just the very fundamental premise of higher education taking public money, being in bed with a multi-billion-dollar entertainment complex is problematic. It's problematic. There's a lot of weeds in there that create issues that now need to be. I think the question is, can you untangle those things, or do you just simply have to be willing to come at this with a new framework, right? And the NCAA rulebook, I mean, there's been conversations, coaches that have talked about this for years, right? That the NCAA rulebook for football or for any of these sports just keeps getting bigger and bigger and bigger, right? It's not shrunk to demonstrate a new reality with a new approach. It gets bigger because all of the new rules that are added are addressing prior rules, right? And the evolution that happened in the face of those prior rules. They don't just say, oh, well, that last rule, which was meant to address a different time and a different era of how the sport operated, is no longer relevant. They don't do that. They create a new rule to accommodate for the fact that they have those prior rules. So I just look, like, college football is so much of the doomsday scenario of people like, oh, well, I'm just not going to care about this. Nope. The numbers say differently, right?
Right.
The numbers say that the sport is growing. The numbers say that, honestly, that it hasn't even scratched the surface of what its popularity can be. And I understand there is a segment of college football fan purists that like love the quirks, that love, some of the unique aspects of college football that don't like. It's not that those quirks are going to go away. There will always be quirks to college football, but for the survival of the sport long term, there's going to have to be some serious thought and consideration given to, like, hey, this has to be fresh. This has to be fresh. Yeah. And I see it in the right. Okay, like you're out, Bizzle 84. I'm sorry. And like, that's too bad, but more people are in. The numbers say that more people are in. And it may just be a different demographic, right? Like,
I want to ask the people in the chat. The Bizzle84 is saying, I'm no longer a representative as the audience. Eggman says he's out as well. And I'm an optimist. Here's my point. I think you can have the spirit of college football. This is, at the core, this is not a hard thing. You can have the spirit of college football where academics and education and the region and the pride of the university are all still core to the sport. And you can pay players. You can do both. I think part of that is a willingness on the part of fans to accept that the system was becoming unbearably unfair to the athletes who are on the field. And so compensating them does not it's a lie to begin with. Like the Olympics, the purity of amateur competition is a lie. They have to be sponsored to go to the games. Money as an incentive is there anyway. Money as an incentive has been in football anyway. So what we need to do is come together and say, like, money, like, accept that money has been here the whole time and find a way to keep the spirit of what you love in a structure that allows these players to be paid and compensated without this unbearable deregulation that creates imbalances for, like, the actual construction of what is the destructive part of this, which is they can choose every single year who the highest bidder is. If you eliminate that and, like, say, I'm going to Penn State because I value this package over this package, then you have the spirit of what you wanted, which is guys that want to be at Penn State, and the purity test of, like, Cooper Cousins wants to be at Penn State because he loves Penn State. We can get there. We just have to work at it honestly. And I don't think that anyone's working at it honestly in that spirit, in that drive to have those two things be true at the same time. Let's see what the chat says. You got any thoughts on that, guys?
No, I think everybody
Bizzle
wants to know
says,
how this affects Penn State basketball, Nate.
Oof. It's not great for Penn State basketball. But also, like, T-Frank, and this is such a big part of it. Like, you're like, we don't need to do anything, right? The three of us, people in the chat, we don't need to do anything.
I'm sorry, I'm a fixer. I can't help it. I see a thing. I wanna help.
It is very simply university administrators. This is nobody wants to, like, the NCAA is, it's not like, it's just a thing, right? They made it up. It's an organization of member institutions.
Yes.
Right. That has when people talk about, having a commissioner for college football, right? They already have that. It's the NCAA. It's the NCAA president, right? They all agreed as member institutions of the NCAA that they would participate in this system. That is what NCAA membership equates to in terms of college football or college sports athletics in general. It is the organizing body, the governing body of college athletics. The issue with that is the member institutions of said organization defy all the rules constantly.
Right.
They don't care what, right? There is, it's been so far removed at this point that I don't remember where it came from. Somebody very smart said it, but the unwillingness to be governed is at the heart of all of this, right? Their players have an unwillingness to be governed because they've been on the short end of the stick for the entire duration of all of this. Why would they want to agree to those?
And they don't
rules?
have a long time horizon anyway. They have 4 to 5 years or 8 years if you're lucky. And you don't have the time horizon to give up anything is not incentive for a group of people that turn over regularly. And you're right.
Correct.
And the competition aspect of this without the cooperation from the member institutions has been like it's a pigsty of their own making, which is just the frustrating thing.
Coaches.
Yeah.
Right? Like, coaches aren't participating. They're not actively helping this. If the name's escaping me, Golding, right? Like, they don't care. It's just, hey, is there an avenue to be exploited? Like, that's all this game is there wiggle room for you to get up to the line as close as you can and then dance on it? The more brazen ones go over it. And guess what? They have cohorts in this, which is university administrators that are willing to go to bat for them when they do transgress. Michigan, say what you want, but Michigan said, as an organization, as an institution, when all the Harbaugh stuff happened, that entire deal, which, like, I'm not trying to be clipped for Twitter here for the Michigan culture, they simply said, we will die over this. Like, as an organization, we will fight tooth and nail to say that we are not in the wrong and we do not accept your judgment. And they won a national championship, right? But the problem is when the jury of your peers, which is what the NCAA is, when the jury of your peers are also active competitors to you, that creates its own web of issues, right? How do you get fair judgment when the people who are judging you actively have an interest in your lack of success?
I want to put a button on this because there are a couple other questions I want to get to. Nate, you are cooking, and I'm sorry to cut you off, but I'm
done.
I want to make sure I get a couple of these things in here. If there's one thing that I will say, and again, the model of being the NFL as the successful business model, if there's one thing that unites the 32 owners, it's greed at all levels. They agree that as much as they want to win, they want more money, and they get more money by cooperating. That's why it's a legal mafia. And I love the NFL. The NFL is exactly the core of my being for most of my life, but it is what it is. And like, it somehow is a functioning ability to do those things, and create a great product that doesn't self-sabotage. I think that there's some products that are self-sabotaging. Basketball is less interesting when everyone jacks up threes from 20 feet away. I don't want to get into that conversation. This is one from Allar for Heise on the Blue White Illustrated message board. Fitz, I'm coming to you with this one. With a big transfer class, many people are talking about guys that make an immediate impact on the team. Who are some of the transfer guys that could end up being big-time gets down the road? Because as we talked about, they did try to build the for now and for the future. So who are some of the guys that you think have the for the future aspect to them after 2026?
Yeah, you look at what they brought in, and we've had this conversation a bunch, the guys that can sort of supplement, because you've got guys like Bramer and Burkle that are coming in as seniors, and Trevor Burr is coming in as a redshirt. You've got veterans. Rocco Beck's going to be out of there. So you've got guys that are going to be, we'll call them one and dones for no good reason. But they did bring in a bunch of redshirt freshmen. They brought in a bunch of young guys like Quell, the offensive lineman or the offensive tackle, and Will Tompkins, Vea Akakula. I'm T-Frank. I'm going to need to watch your video again. Sorry. But yeah, they brought in a bunch of those young guys that can sort of solidify them in certain spots. So you brought in 2 receivers in Karan Brookins and Zay Robinson. Zay Robinson may factor in as punt returner this year for Penn State, but that's probably a longer term play. Keith Jones Jr. is only a redshirt sophomore as well. So you solidify, or not, you didn't solidify your roster, but you reinforced your roster with guys that not only you can play this year, but you can also develop. And that's one of the things I really liked about what they did. It wasn't just go out and find the guys that can help you win in 2026. It's getting you to the next level. So I've talked about Chris Filippo a little bit before, the linebacker. He's going to take some time to grow into what he can be. But you're looking at a guy that's 2 years into his college career. So are you going to play him on special teams? Are you going to try and redshirt him? I doubt we see a ton of that, where you're bringing guys in that have a redshirt available that are still early in their career, because they're here, they want to play. Like that's kind of how that works. So, and a guy like Filippo is a special teams kind of body at 6'4", 208, growing from safety to linebacker. So you hope that he can hit some people. You go from there, and defensively, there's probably not as many of those guys. But I just like what they've done to sort of reinforce that. I mean, Alexander McPherson's a defensive end, played at Colorado as a true freshman. Is he going to be a guy that starts this year? I don't know. I would say probably not, but he's going to play as a true sophomore.
He's on my radar for sure. Yeah,
definitely. I mean, you've like I said, and I'm doing kind of a deep dive into Iowa State's last 5 recruiting classes under Matt Campbell, because you can take a lot of that information, understand where they've had success, when they've had success. Specifically, they've got no commits right now in the class of 2027, but honestly not that far behind the schedule that they were on when they were at Iowa State, because they would take some early commits but really get cooking maybe later in the process. So I think that you're looking at how these guys scout, how these guys are intentional about the way that they've gone about this kind of thing. And you look to some of those young guys and say, okay, well, this makes sense. If you're going to replace Michael Troutman with another redshirt freshman offensive lineman, and you feel pretty decent about how those things play out. You're going to
drop a name in here for that?
Yeah.
Will Tompkins has been a guy that I've heard a lot of good things about. I think he's somebody that I apologize if you said him earlier, but it just came to mind when you said that, of a guy who I think is going to be very, very good at some point.
Yeah, and he's coming off an injury as well. So like there's some, a couple of guys that they brought over. It's going to take some more time for them to get adjusted and back into the full swing of things. But yeah, Will Tompkins is a guy. Like I said, I like the going back to call back earlier in the show. I like what the 3 offensive linemen that they brought in as redshirt freshmen can be eventually.
Yeah.
Does that mean they're going to do anything this year or make a push for the starting position? Not necessarily. But you've got an opportunity to grow the roster and reinforce the roster. Just looking down here at what was brought in, even McDaniels is interesting to me, because it kind of reminds me of when Penn State brought in A.J. Litton a couple of years ago. And Litton, of course, had a different profile in terms of a highly regarded guy that went to Florida State, didn't really make it there. He came to Penn State, didn't make it here, but at the same time was a heck of a gunner. Like, he was really good at being a gunner. And you're going to need those guys that play special teams, that are able to do those specialized roles. And I think McDaniels, for a guy that's almost 6'3", runs a 4.4, 205, you can do something with that, right? So I'm looking at those guys, McDaniels, Filippo, to sort of reinforce what they're trying to do on special teams. And I think this is a group that's dedicated to special teams. They wouldn't have retained Justin Lustig if that wasn't the case. And I think that they're going to spend a lot of time in the spring kind of figuring out who those athletes are, because you're taking a step up. When you go from Iowa State to Penn State, you're taking a step up in the grade of athlete. And I think they're going to see that. And I think that's going to reflect on special teams probably sooner than any other facet in the game.
I want to answer this question here from Poncho570 to end the show here. He says, is Matt Campbell's version of Penn State a more athletic Iowa? What I mean by is roster construction, the types of players, both physical and mentally. Okay. Penn State wants to be Penn State. So comparisons to Ohio State, Iowa, the examples of external things, this staff wants to be Penn State. And historically, Penn State has been able to throw the football. So to me, when you say, do they want to be Iowa? Iowa, as a concept, is a self-limiting philosophy because we don't believe we can throw the football. We're not going to develop a passing game that can do such things with a quarterback and receivers. So no, like at the face value, I do think that is not correct, that they're not interested in limiting themselves. However, do they want to play traditional football that is strong in the trenches and is built with a foundation that is durable and will not be reliant on splashing at certain positions to create highlights? I think they want to be more than that. So chasing the elite athletes that may or may not work out, that have all the star ratings and everyone wants, maybe that's not what they're doing, but that's not saying they don't want athletic, explosive, talented football players. But being good at football is a foundational piece to what they want here at Penn State. So is the external evaluation and comparison, I think, is the problem here of what they want to be. And that is at least how I understand it.
I think I think you look at Iowa as an extremely well-coached unit that if they had better athletes would be a contender, and they just don't have those. And I think that that's what you're looking for with Penn State. You want to be extremely well-coached. You want to be, and this is, thinking back in the last 5 or 6 years is probably similar to what Penn State has done. Be defense first and then have your offense clean it up. And I think that that's a mindset that you get when you kind of put your better athletes on defense, as Iowa has for years. Funny side note, Steve Wilfong just put in a pick for Jake Naurat out of Illinois, the number 2 quarterback in the class of 2027 to Iowa. So do that math. But like, you always look at Iowa and you say, okay, well, they've had wonderful tight ends. They've had wonderful spots. Remember back to the Robert Gallery days when they had awesome offensive lines. They've always had pieces in spots. Maryland's always had pieces in spots. But if you felt that if one of these programs that was well coached, and I'm back on Iowa, I'm off Maryland now for the clarification's sake. If they had more steady athletes across the board, if they had better consistency across the board, or a quarterback even at times. You look at Iowa last year, they beat Penn State with a running back playing quarterback, and that's disappointing for Penn State when you think back of that punch in the gut. But no, you're looking at a well-coached team, defense, special teams, offense. Coincidentally, that's what James Franklin kind of tried to do, and it tailspun out of control at the end there, obviously. But yeah, I mean, Iowa as a concept is great. It's boring, that's no getting around that. Yeah. But if you do the right things, do the little things right, which Iowa usually does, then you end up pretty successful. And that's been a pretty successful program. So I think that, he's not trying to be Iowa. Let's not get this twisted. But there are elements of what Iowa does, albeit boring, that can result in a really, really good football team.
Nate, final thoughts. Get us out of here. We just want to hear your voice one time before we hit the outro music. What are you working on this week at BlueWhiteIllustrated.com? What are you thinking about here as we wrap up?
Yeah, we're going to go meet all these guys this afternoon. So I'm looking forward to that. And, if Matt Campbell and his staff are any indication, I would anticipate that all these guys are personable and upstand, right? Like all the good stuff, right? It seems to be carrying over from Iowa State to Penn State, which is to say nothing of what Penn State had, right? But like, I've been doing this for 20 years and that includes multiple different head coaches and leadership elements. And very rarely have I had anything but very good things to say about the personnel that makes up these programs. I mean, this program, I should say, right? It's top to bottom, just class. So, yeah, it's a exciting day to get in front of these guys and get to know a little bit more about their story. I am sure there will be, it is going to be ripe for cliche, but we're going to go there. We're gonna
tell all those stories.
Have some fun with it. Yeah.
Tell all those stories this weekend beyond BlueWhiteIllustrated.com. One final thing from me. We're going to be off for the week of spring break. I believe that's the second week in March. So these guys deserve a rest. They've been going hard since the last time we had any time off, which was around the bowl game. And even then, we still had, I think, 3 shows that week. So they're getting their spring break as well. We'll be back, though, with spring football and all those things. And of course, we're coming to you next week here on the Blue White Illustrated YouTube channel. And more immediately, tomorrow, BWI Live, talking about recruiting. I'm Thomas Rankard. Fitz and I will see you tomorrow. We'll talk to you then.